I have been excited for the Julien Baker and Torres collaboration ever since we first got an inkling that it was happening. And ever since we have heard a little bit more, I just keep getting more and more excited. I am very excited about this resurgence, this reclamation of country music in general. I am so glad to see an art form that is traditionally very associated with people that are marginalized, people that come from different backgrounds, but that was kind of whitewashed, it was kind of patriot washed for many years after 9/11. But there have been more and more movements to take country music back to its roots, to take country back to what it originally was, to take country back for people of color and for people that are queer. And I'm so excited that we're seeing creators like Beyonce and Tanner Adele reclaim music for Black people, because the American frontier was very diverse. It was not whitewashed the way cowboy movies want you to believe. In my opinion, country music is really of and for the people of America, and it's really great to see it re-diversifying the way it really should have always been. So obviously, like many of us, I have been loving the song Sugar in the Tank, but I've seen a number of people, especially younger listeners, who don't necessarily know what the song is about, what it means, the metaphors, things like that. So I wanted to discuss it for everybody who might have questions, want to know what I think it means, things of that nature. Obviously, we haven't had a tremendous amount of dialogue from Julien or for Torres about like what they specifically meant the song to mean, but this is just my interpretation. Throughout history, there have been a lot of like slang terms for people that seem like they're queer or queer adjacent, or they behave like they're queer, and Sugar in the Tank is one that has historically been associated with especially queer men who acted effeminate. But I know it's kind of one of those things where, just like the F slur, it really doesn't matter what like flavor of queer you are. You have probably had it thrown at you, especially if you're somebody in the South. I know that there were people that have referred to me throughout my life as having a little sugar in the tank. Definitely not as many as if I was a guy, and because it was used against me, it was something that like I thought a lot about, probably a little bit too much. Because for me, having a little sugar in the tank, I don't really necessarily associate that initially with a gas tank. We'll get there. But it seems more like, oh, you know, they're just a little bit sweeter. They got a little bit of extra sweetness. To me, as a child, I thought it was something that was good. I thought it was something that was fun. I didn't necessarily realize that there is often sometimes a bit of judgment behind it. There are some people that are more accepting than others when they're throwing that phrase around. And I love whenever you have a phrase that is historically a little bit fraught, being transformed from something that used to cause harm to many of us into something that is empowering for many of us. I mean, that's the big reason that I have the Julien Baker Queer Joy flag, because I think it's so important to take things like the word queer and to reclaim them and to make them into things that we use affirmatively, because it's incredibly empowering, because then people can't use those words against you negatively anymore, because it's something that you wholly owned about yourself. So I want to talk about the other connotation of sugar in the tank, because I think this is one of the things that has confused a lot of people. They're used to sugar in the gas tank of an automobile, and I think that this is obviously very deliberate, right? And in the United States especially, you had like the teen dating culture and the everybody having more than one car at their house culture rising at the same time. So in the United States, especially when you're looking back at like the 50s and the 60s, there is this intrinsic link between dating culture, especially heterosexual dating culture, and automobiles. And I think that is one of the reasons why you see so many automobile references in a lot of love songs, especially country love songs, especially songs that originate from the United States, because that culture of going out to the point and necking with your significant other is so ingrained in our culture. And in a way, putting sugar in the tank of that is kind of a metaphor for choosing to get away from heterosexual dating and choosing someone that you love based on your gender preference. It's about subverting those expectations that a lot of us have to be in a heterosexual relationship and do all of the things that are expected of us, and subverting that in deciding to take off and you make our own course, and to not, you know, get in the car and drive to the peak, put sugar in the tank. We don't need that. You know, the girl next door is already here. But let's get into the lyrics a little bit more. One of the things that I love about this is that you've got all of these loving phrases, but there's also a lot of phrases that have to do with addiction and dependence on substances or things. And whenever you have that kind of stuff coming from Julien Baker, it is impossible for me to separate that from addiction. So much of her content has been about addiction. I can only assume that this is being done on purpose, right? And in a lot of senses, this is about enduring something bad because of your love, enduring suffering because of the person that you're with, or because of the love that you share. Like the lyric, I love you all the way to hell and back, hits differently to me as a Sapphic person, because often Sapphic relationships have more obstacles, have more things. We have to often walk through hell before we can be together. Like, so often that is inseparable from our love and our relationships and our meaning. And I love that this is the first phrase that she uses, especially because as a queer person, especially as a queer person growing up in certain areas of the United States, from families that are more Christian, in neighborhoods or in groups that are more Christian, it can often feel like the only way you can pursue a queer relationship is by also accepting that you're going to go to hell. Because oftentimes in America, we are told these things go hand in hand. If you do this, you will go to hell. That's fine, because I love you and I'll go to hell and back for you. That line is so important as a first line, and it sets such a great tone for the rest of the song. And then next, I love you tied up on the train tracks. This is another good set of imagery from American transportation history and also American media history. We often think of the villain who grabs the woman and abducts her and ties her to the train tracks just to threaten her lover. And I think it's one of those things that is being used to say, like, even if you're a victim, that's fine. Because a lot of times our culture gives us this imagery that, like, if we are a victim, if we allow ourselves to feel like a victim, to become a victim, to be victimized, then we have less value, that we have not taken the appropriate actions to be safe. Often the onus of Sapphic safety falls on Sapphic people. It's not considered the fact that a lot of people hurt us and they are responsible for their own actions and should stop hurting us. Then the next line is, I love you clear as day and in the dark. And this song both has this, like, this juxtaposition of both how much I love you and how much I'm willing to go through for you, but it's also got this juxtaposition of, like, when you love someone and when you have a problem with addiction and when you've struggled with addiction in the past, that often the process of falling in love, it is something that you can become addicted to as well. And if you're not guarding yourself against that, that can become a problem in your relationship. This song is about so much good and bad and the way those things come together, and the ways, especially if you are a damaged person, you take some of that damage into that relationship, whether you're healed or not. Then the next line is, I love you sleeping on my dead left arm. And that, like, it sets a very romantic tone, right? You're thinking of two people who have been in an embrace for so long that it's cut off circulation to her arm. But when you love somebody that much, you don't even care, because the minor discomfort of your arm that you can't feel is nothing compared to the fact that your love is there. I love you all the time that I can get. I think this is a great reminder that, like, nothing, not even time with somebody, is promised. And a lot of times in country music, we very often have the juxtaposition of happiness and sorrow, and the things that make my life good and the things that make my life bad. And I like this acceptance that, like, I know that especially with everything that we're dealing with, this may not last forever. It may just only last as long as we have it. And even if we are dedicated to it lasting forever, like, we are both mortals. At any given time, something could go wrong and take one or both of us out of the equation, and I accept that. There's so much in this song about, like, I'm accepting all of the things that can happen. I am going into this love with my eyes open. I love you now already and not yet. I love this because it's like, I love you and I love the person that you're going to be. Because so often other people's love for you is contingent on you never changing, never growing, never becoming something other than what they want you to be. I love you deadly as a heart attack. Again, this juxtaposition of good and bad, positive and negative imagery, and we have this also juxtaposition of your heart. Your heart can stop. It can stop your life. But also sometimes when you're falling in love, it can feel like a heart attack. You can feel like you're dying. You feel like you're under duress. Like, it's definitely a big physiological thing that is oriented around your heart, because your heart can be pounding, your heart can skip beats. Like, there are all of these things that make your heart feel like the center of your love. And I love you halfway in a paper sack. I didn't fully understand this line at first, but now I'm thinking about when you have a whiskey bottle or something like that, and you've gotten it from the liquor store, so it's in a paper bag, and you're in a hurry to consume it, and you're probably consuming it someplace that's not necessarily legal to consume it, so you're just folding that brown paper sack down so that you can take a chug out of it. And again, like I said, making that connection to addiction, addictive substances, things of that nature. Then we go into the chorus. I love you swimming upstream in a flash flood. I love this imagery because at first I thought thought about like salmon and how salmon swim upstream to spawn and to mate and everything like that. And then I was also thinking about like natural disasters and also just like disasters in the course of our regular day-to-day life. And often like it is when somebody that we know is under duress, when they're forced on their toes, when they're forced to adapt and adjust and change on the fly, that we really realize what they're capable of doing and we have a new appreciation for them. I think the flash flood imagery is especially important because, like I said, you're coming from this like deconstructed Christian background where, you know, the flood is obviously an important part of the Bible, and specifically like the flood being God's punishment, and queer people kind of having that fear that the church often puts in us of God's punishment. And then you have this added line, wondering when I'm gonna drown. It's an understanding that you're in a danger, that because you're close to this person, you're putting yourself and your emotions at risk, and that it could not end up well for you. And often when we're going through something that is intense and very emotional, like a breakup, it can feel very much like we're drowning. Picking up steam on the off-ramp, getting the hell out of downtown. I love, again, the return to this metaphor of cars, and specifically using a car to flee a backwoods town that maybe doesn't accept you and your love to somewhere that is more accepting. I always think back to the Tracy Chapman song Fast Car, and now that I know she's gay, I understand why I like that song so much for so many years. Let you be the chain that keeps me closer to the ground. I love this because often a chain, a ball and chain, it is a word that is used to make a female partner feel like a burden, feel like something that is holding someone back. But in this song, they are inviting their partner to be the chain that keeps them closer to the ground because they understand that something that they want to be, in my opinion, is more grounded. They don't want to be spacey. They don't want to go off on flights of fancy anymore. They want to be grounded in reality with that person. But obviously there's also the other added element of like, if that person isn't dedicated to you in the right way, they can be a chain in an totally different, encumbering way. And often it is not until after we have made that plunge that we really realize whether or not that chain is for the good or for the bad. I'm reminded of a song called The Kite String and the Anchor Rope by a band called Prides, and that song is really about how a partner or a friend can both build someone up but also hold somebody down and can orient somebody like in the middle. The song is a little bit more than that, but we're just going to keep it we're going to keep it surface level for here. I love you all the ways that I know how. I think this is especially profound as somebody that is older, because often like we realize that like maybe all of the ways that we know how to love somebody are not good enough for that person, or maybe it hasn't been good enough for people before them. So we're committing like all of the ways that I know personally how to love you, I commit that to you. And specifically, like, I hope that the love that I can give you can satisfy you in the ways that you need to be satisfied. Because often it really doesn't matter how much you love somebody. If you can't show them that you love them the way that they need to be, it can often feel like you're in opposition, or like you're being engulfed, or you're like being not understood. Been wrong too many times to count. This acknowledgement that she is a person at this stage in her life that has failures that she has acknowledged, and that she has been wrong and she can acknowledge that, it shows a certain level of growth. But it also shows a certain level of like skepticism over whether or not that this is actually going to work this time. Like there's an acknowledgement, like every time I have gambled on something before, it has not necessarily played out. The only reason that I am still available to love you is because it has not worked out. I hope this time is better. And sometimes, realistically, that's the best attitude to go into a relationship with. When you go into a relationship, especially later in life, when you have a little bit of damage and you don't have the possibility open that this may be another failure, you're kind of lying to yourself and the other person in a lot of ways, in my opinion at least. Then down to the last drag. Again, another like addiction reference, specifically using an addictive substance like nicotine down to the very last itty bitty bit that you can get out of it, milking that addiction for the most of its addictive qualities. It also suggests that Julien may be admitting to the fact that like she got in too deep. To me, this suggests a relationship that at least in part had a quality where she felt like it was addictive and she was trying to use it for all of the like dopamine that she could get out of it, the way you would use an addictive substance. It's one of those things, and I really appreciate when a songwriter can do this, that at first it's like, oh, it's so romantic, I love love you down to the very last drag. And you're like, well, what do you drag from? Like, what does it say when you take it down to that very last drag? When you need all the way down to that very last drag? There's so much more that becomes apparent the more that you think about it. I'll love you strung out on the drying rack. When we think about something that's on the drying rack, it's been through the washer, it's been agitated, it might have been wrung out a couple of times, it's been through its paces, it's maybe emerged a little cleaner from that, but it definitely needs time to rest, to dry, to take its moment. And it suggests, like, even when you are devoid of all of the things that make you you, even when you're completely wrung out of everything, the essence of you, I'm still going to love you. And an important observation to me is the fact that this does not sound like two opposing points in a relationship. This seems like one person talking about the person that they love, but that means that we are completely devoid of that other person's perspective. Are they in the same place? Are they committing in the same way? Are they committed to loving Julien and Torres until they're strung out on the drying rack? And I know that ostensibly this song is both by Julien Baker and Torres, so obviously there's possibilities that this is multiple of their relationships that they're both discussing. But the fact that Julien is doing the large majority of, like, the verses makes me think that this might be something that is more personal to her. I hate just watching through the window when you pull up and I'm still thinking I should stay home. Sitting outside with the engine running, just waiting on me to change. This speaks of a situation where the other person has been waiting on them to get to their level, to get to their point, to get to the point where they're willing to get into the car and be in a relationship, a committed relationship together. But Julien / Torres / whatever is hemming and hawing and waiting around because they're like, maybe I should stay home. Maybe this isn't the best decision for me. Maybe this isn't the best decision for her. Maybe we're all so unhealed at this point that getting together in the car and pursuing this relationship together is not going to work out. Then come on, baby, put a little sugar in the tank and I'll love you all the way. And like I said, it goes back to this initial metaphor of putting sugar in the tank, right? Put a little sugar in your tank could be interpreted as act a little more gay. Like, the reason that I'm hesitating is because you're treating this very much like cis heteronormativity, and that may be where the car is being used as a metaphor and the car's gas tank is being used so heavily as a metaphor, because the singer in this equation has a lot of hesitations. They're not quite ready because the other person is still holding on too tight to their ideals of cis heteronormativity. They want to go in their car and go downtown and, you know, start necking. Maybe put a little sugar in that tank, slow down, stop trying to run away from the problems that we have, fix the problems that we have. Like, sure, especially for queer people, this metaphor of, like, getting in the car and taking that fast car and driving until we're someplace where we can be safe together, that's an option, but it also isn't the only option. There are a number of people that decide to stay in this small town that they're at, that don't want to run away to someplace that is a little bit like more of a city, someplace that might be perceived as more safe, that they have roots there and they want to stay rooted there because it's better for their own, you know, physical and mental well-being. I very much am somebody who is rooted to my hometown area of Baltimore. If I get more than like 45 minutes away from this city, my skin starts to chafe. And like, I do live in a suburb, and most of what I know of Maryland is more suburban Maryland. I am not like a Baltimore City girly by any means. And I love the way this metaphor works both ways. It works from the perspective of, like, I need you to act a little more gay, but also the perspective of, I need you to not expect for both of us to run away together because what I need might be here. And then it goes into that chorus again to stress that chorus again. My only real negative piece of feedback about this song is that it could go on for like 2 or 4 more verses and I would still be completely happy with that. I know that they probably kept it a little bit shorter because some of the verse structure is a little bit more simplistic and that can make a song struggle to last for longer than 2 verses, but I think they probably could have gone out to like 4 and I would have been totally happy. But I'll just listen on repeat for a while since it's not, you know, 7 minutes long. I also like the way this chorus functions in opposition to the previous, where she says, picking up steam on the off-ramp, getting the hell out of downtown. That suggests that in the past, the singer had wanted to run away to someplace that they could be safer together, they could be happy together, but has realized the bigger need to sit down roots where they're actually at. Like I said at the top, this is really just my interpretation of this song. It is still a song that I love immensely. It is so good. I am so excited to hear the full album. Obviously, we've heard some live versions of the songs, but like the produced version of Sugar in the Tank was so much more than the live version even, so I have pretty high hopes based on the little bit of the lives that I've allowed myself to listen to. If you like Sapphic takes on pop music, I do a lot of that. I also talk about other Sapphic-related stuff. If you're interested in Sapphic music and pop music as a whole, I've done a number of other videos on artists like Taylor Swift, Chapel Roan. I've done a video on the Sapphic takeover. Any of those things I think would probably interest you at this point. I am still a small channel. I've only got 2,000 subscribers, so your likes, comments, and subscriptions really do help me out a ton. Have a wonderful day.